It started like any other quiet morning in Round Rock, Texas, where sunlight poured over tidy lawns and identical mailboxes gleamed like soldiers in formation. Harold Jennings stood on his new porch with a mug of coffee in hand, breathing in the peace he'd worked his whole life to earn. 52 years old, a logistics manager, a man who clawed his way from long nights in warehouses to the comfort of a single-story brick home he could finally call his own. The neighborhood looked like a dream. Kids riding bikes, sprinklers hissing, dogs barking behind picket fences. For the first time in years, Harold felt stillness. But peace, as he was about to learn, doesn't always last long when you're the wrong kind of neighbor in the right kind of place. It began with a letter, a neatly folded notice taped to his front door, printed on fine paper with a logo at the top, Sandalwood Estates Homeowners Association. Your mailbox color does not match community standards. Please repaint within 10 business days. Harold blinked, then looked at the plain white mailbox. It wasn't rusty, it wasn't chipped, just simple. He chuckled, thinking it had to be a mistake. But that letter was only the first cut. Days later came another about his trash bins being visible from the street, then one about his lawn height, another about his porch light. Week after week, the same signature at the bottom. Linda Marin, HOA president. Harold didn't know her then, but soon her name would haunt his every morning. At first, he brushed it off, told himself it was just an overzealous neighbor trying to keep things neat. But when he realized other people's lawns were overgrown and nobody else had letters taped to their doors, the truth hit harder. He wasn't being managed. He was being watched. The day he caught her staring, clipboard in hand, noting down his license plate number, something inside him hardened. When he asked her why, she gave him a smile so thin it could cut glass. "Mr. Jennings, the rules are applied equally," she said, adjusting her pearls. "We just like to make sure new residents start on the right foot." Harold tilted his head. "So I'm being watched more closely?" Her smile didn't fade. "Considerate guidance." And just like that, she turned and walked off, heels clicking on the sidewalk like punctuation marks on a warning he hadn't yet understood. That night, Harold sat at his kitchen table staring at the growing stack of notices. The letters were polite on paper, but cruel in spirit. He could feel something deeper in her tone, a challenge, as if his very presence disturbed the balance of her perfect neighborhood. So Harold did something he never thought he'd do. He ordered cameras. Small, discreet ones, the kind that could sit in the gutters or behind porch lights. Not because he was scared, but because something in gut told him he'd need proof one day. That instinct would save him later. The weeks passed, and Linda's control grew bolder. A $250 fine appeared next, unapproved decorative item visible from the street. The item? A small American flag Harold had planted near his walkway in honor of his late father, an Army vet. When Harold confronted her, she didn't even flinch. "Rules are rules," she said. "If you can't follow them, perhaps this isn't the right community for you." Harold's voice rose. "You're harassing me." She stepped closer. "Choose your words carefully, Mr. Jennings." Neighbors watched through blinds but said nothing. That silence hurt worse than the fines, because silence meant agreement. But Harold wasn't the kind of man to back down when truth was on his side. So he waited, observed, recorded, and one evening, as his camera silently blinked red, they caught something strange. Linda herself standing at the edge of his driveway long after dark, staring at his house for minutes before walking away. That was when Harold knew this wasn't about grass or lights. It was personal. 2 weeks later, it got worse. The morning was calm when Harold heard the sound of engines outside. He stepped out, coffee in hand, and froze. A flatbed truck sat at the end of his lawn, for men unloading shovels, cones, and pickaxes. And there she was, Linda, giving orders like a general. "Morning," Harold said cautiously. "What's going on?" She didn't even look up. "Drainage improvements," she said. "Board approved." Harold frowned. "Funny, haven't seen any drainage problems here." Linda scribbled something on her clipboard. "You're new. You wouldn't know." Then she pointed at the ground. The workers began digging, right on the line of his property. Harold stepped forward. "How far is this going?" Perimeter adjustment, she said flatly. Completely standard. But as the trench stretched wider and deeper, looping around his yard like a moat, Harold's blood went cold. When the crew reached his driveway, one asked, "Ma'am, do we cut through here too?" And Linda, without hesitation, said, "Yes, all the way." Harold's voice cracked. "That'll block my driveway." She didn't even glance at him. Temporary inconvenience. For the greater good of the neighborhood. Neighbors stepped onto porches, whispering, watching like spectators to a cruel ritual. By sundown, Harold's house stood isolated by dirt mounds, his driveway half-buried, his truck trapped. Linda smiled, thanked the workers, and walked away. That night, Harold sat in the dark staring at the footage. Every second recorded, her pointing, directing, smiling. The sound of shovels in the background, like echoes of mockery. His anger turned to steel. He wasn't going to yell or fight back physically. He was going to expose her. Slowly, smartly. He started by showing two neighbors, Janet from across the street and Richard from down the block. They watched in disbelief. "That's not drainage," Janet whispered. She told him exactly where to dig. Richard shook his head. "She's been running this neighborhood like her own empire for years. But you've got proof now, man. Real proof." Harold nodded. "She's been watching me. Now I'm watching her." Within days, word spread. Quietly at first. Whispered during morning walks. Passed from one kitchen to another. People who had once feared Linda now questioned her. And as gossip grew, so did courage. When the next HOA meeting came, the clubhouse was packed, neighbors standing shoulder to shoulder, waiting for answers. Linda sat at the head table, smiling stiffly, flanked by nervous board members. Harold sat in the front row, laptop on his lap. The meeting began with routine chatter until Richard stood up. "Before we discuss pool maintenance, maybe we should talk about the trench around Harold Jennings' house." Murmurs rippled. Linda's smile froze. "That project," she said, "was approved for community drainage." Harold stood. "Then maybe you'd like to explain this." He turned the laptop toward the room. The video played. Linda pointing, drawing lines in the dirt with her shoe, ordering workers to dig deeper. Gasps erupted. A woman shouted, "That's not drainage. That's harassment." Another voice rose. "She finally for Christmas lights last year." Someone else yelled, "We've all had enough." Linda's composure cracked. "This is fake," she snapped. "Edited to make me look guilty." Harold's voice was calm. "The cameras don't lie." The room fell into chaos. Neighbors arguing, board members whispering, and for the first time, Linda's authority trembled. By the end of the meeting, lines had been drawn between those who feared her and those who'd finally seen her for what she was. Harold didn't feel victory that night, only exhaustion. He wanted peace, not fame. But the next morning, he made a decision that would change everything. He uploaded the footage online. No commentary, no edits, just truth. HOA present orders trench around my home, caught on camera. Within hours, it spread. Hundreds of views, then thousands. Then local news stations called. Reporters showed up with microphones. Neighbors peeked through curtains as Harold told his story to the world. "I bought this home to build a future. Instead, I was harassed and targeted. If I didn't have cameras, no one would believe me." That night, the story aired. Linda's face, cold commanding, broadcast across Texas. Public outrage exploded. Emails flooded the HOA. Phone lines jammed. Neighbors once silent now spoke out. A few defended her, but most were done being afraid. The board cracked from the inside. Members resigned. Others called for her removal. Linda tried to fight back, sending one final violation notice. Failure to maintain property cleanliness due to trench debris. Harold laughed bitterly. The debris from her trench. But she was already finished. The following week, the city council got involved after seeing the viral footage. Harold attended the hearing, standing before a full chamber of officials and neighbors. When he finished speaking, a councilwoman leaned forward and said, "Mr. Jennings, this isn't just about one yard. This is about accountability." Applause filled the room. In the back, Linda sat stiffly, pale, eyes hollow. Her empire had fallen. A month later, it became official. The HOA voted her out. A new board took over, and one of their first actions was to fill the trench and restore Harold's yard at the association's expense. On that morning, as workers shoveled dirt back into the earth, Harold stood on his porch with his dog and his coffee, watching the scars of months of abuse slowly disappear. For the first time in a long while, the air felt clean. Janet walked over, smiling. "You did it." Harold shook his head. "No, we did." That evening, he took a slow walk down Sandwood Drive. The neighbors waved now. Some apologized. Some just smiled quietly, but all of them different than before. The silence that once protected injustice had broken. Standing by his restored driveway, Harold looked up at the sunset and said softly, "We're home now." The cameras still blinked red under his roof, not out of fear, but as a reminder, because sometimes truth needs witnesses. Sometimes peace must be protected, and sometimes the downfall of the powerful begins the moment they forget that someone's always watching. Hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories that matter. And let's keep the conversation going.